we're going to talk today about what is UX strategy and who can do it. I do have plans for future sessions, and we'll get to those in a moment. But today, that's what we're going to focus on. This is sort of a foundational conversation that we're going to have. And as Raymond alluded, I have been a designer and a researcher since 2007, but I became fully dedicated to research in 2015 when I started working at Wells Fargo. Nielsen Norman does not have a UX strategy certification, and they call it UX management. I think it should be called UX strategy, but that's what it's called. So I'm certified in research and in UX management. Over the past 2.5 years, I've applied all of those learnings at XPO, and I have identified and created 3 UX champions out of our VP business stakeholders. I've convinced the business and product stakeholders to coordinate with me on creating a 5-year UX roadmap, which they did not have any kind of 5-year vision. And then this year, I've been able to start to initiate 5 and more UX research-led projects with my design partner, who's also on the call tonight. And they have been prioritized and funded. So very excited about that. And spoilers, the UX champions and the how to get research-led projects funded and prioritized, those will be our next 2 sessions. So I know that y'all will be interested in finding out how to apply this strategy process. So why are you here? I had a very failed attempt with Linnea to try and get you to answer these questions. I sent out an email blast. I tried to start a chat. I think I failed completely. I don't understand Linnea. I would like to send them some notes about user experience, but go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and Raymond will collect them, and we will take breaks periodically to talk about your questions and try and answer as many of them as possible. You know the Zoom rules, mute your audio unless you've been asked to unmute. And be sure that your Zoom name is your actual name so that you can, if you can be called on to elaborate on your questions, that'll smooth things out a little bit. So to move on, I'm going to go ahead and answer your very first question. The answer is yes. The deck, the notes, and the recording will be shared afterwards. You don't have to ask. We will definitely include them. Raymond will be sending you an invite to the UXr Guild Slack group. And we had talked about it previously. I didn't get a chance to update the slide, but you will be invited. And I have set up an exclusive channel just for the people in this class. I call it class, it's a session, where we can continue the conversation. And I'm a prolific sharer of articles and resources, and whether you like it or not, UX cartoons. So that will be happening too. So definitely do accept the invite. Let me know when you're in. I will add you to the channel. It's a private channel, so you have to be invited by me or by Raymond in order to get in. But definitely want to hear from you, and any questions that you didn't get answered during the session today, we'll be happy to answer them in the Slack channel for everybody. I think it'll be a great conversation. So without further ado, let's talk about strategy. So the definition of strategy is a set of coordinated actions which will guide you along a journey to reach a desired future state over an established period of time. That's just textbook definition. That's all that is. So UX strategy, according to Career Foundry, is a detailed plan for how we keep the user's experience in line with the overall goals and objectives of the company. UX strategy can help ensure that the organization's vision of what they want their customers/users to experience can become a reality while staying within predetermined company guidelines. And this is the crux of UX strategy. UX strategy is literally just the user plus business. What are the business goals? What are the user's needs? How can we merge them together to create the best situation for both? And that's how we win over the business to our side, is by showing how we can make their goals come true by meeting the user's needs. That's it. Everything else is is all persuasion and influence and becoming an authority and speaking to that. And that's basically what the rest of our conversation will be about. And one of the key points is that you must speak to them about UX in their own language. You know, the UX language that we use when we talk to each other doesn't work when you're trying to talk to the business. You have to use the business language that they use. And that is a key point to getting them to hear you. You know, a lot of what I hear with other higher ups and everything is that UX is all touchy feely and, you know, and while you know, making users happy sounds great, but, you know, they're really focused on the bottom line, making profit, being successful and everything. So we have to couch this in those terms to make them understand how helping the users helps them. So what is good UX strategy? A good UX strategy entails researching and recognizing the constraints and concerns from all sides and painting a big red target on the wall so everyone involved can make decisions that serve researched, vetted, and defined objectives. And that is according to Robert Hochman Jr. from UXPin. And they actually have a free ebook. There's a link in the bottom to a UX strategy field guide. So y'all should really download that. Here we have the components of good strategy. And it's an authentic vision of the future. If you've ever heard the term BHAG, it's a big, hairy, audacious goal. Nielsen Norman uses this term, so does Jared School. And this is something that a lot of times you'll find that your business stakeholders and sometimes even your product stakeholders sort of get lost in the weeds. They're down at the, you know, micro level, and that they lose the big picture. And so it's our job to push them as strategists and everything to make these, you know, big, hairy, audacious goals, or BHAGs, and then start planning for them. And that's how we move it along, and that's how we make things happen. So, you know, we have to have a plan. That's another component. It answers the what, why, who, and how, and it supports the strategic view while implementing tasks. So you have those two levels. Here's the big view of what we want to do. Here's the tasks that we need to get done in order to get to there. Strategic milestones. So we have to have a course of actions aligned with objectives for reaching this vision. This is something I've noticed is a problem where I'm at right now. When I talk them into doing the UX roadmap, what I noticed is that we were planning 3 months at a time. And, you know, we might have this goal that goes way off into the distance, but by only planning 3 months at a time and only having a vision for 3 months at a time, we were basically drawing an asterisk. We were not drawing a line towards that big goal. So by having those strategic milestones of where you want to go and how it's going to take you to get there, that's how you can stay on course. Now, you know, strategy is a living document. It's not something that is static. You don't build it once and then just follow it like a recipe for the rest of your life. That's just not the way it works. It's a living document that has to be refreshed every once in a while. And that's where governance comes in. So for decision-making and change management, to support the long-term commitment to executing the strategy, you need, governance and continually massaging your strategy, continually massaging your roadmap. And then the right team, a committed cross-functional multi-level group, strong, focused with executive support. That means people from UX, that means people from engineering, that means people from product, and also people from business who are basically funding all this. So what is not good UX strategy? Short-term tactics, baby steps, de-scoping user needs out of projects, these are bad. Any strategy that we do once and put on the shelf, those are called spots, strategic plans on the shelf. Also not good UX strategy, because it doesn't matter how well thought out, how detailed it is, how many deliverables you've got in there. if it's not implemented, it's not doing any good. And also UX going it alone without the buy-in of product and business. This is not good UX strategy. This is not something we can do alone. We have to get the buy-in in order to make it work. And that's sort of what we'll talk about in the next session, about getting the buy-in from the business and, you know, getting the buy-in from product. I would say of the two, getting buy-in from business is the most important, because they're the ones that control the budget. And if they're bought in, product will come along, engineering will come along. So that has been my philosophy. It's been a little bit controversial at my office, but that's been my approach, and it's served me very well. So I'm going to keep doing it. So we are now in questions. So Raymond, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, Jillian, the first question is from Ralph Lord, who asks, who owns the UX strategy?
I would say, just by virtue of it being the UX strategy, UX owns it. But as I just mentioned, we can't do it alone. It has to be something that is worked on collaboratively. I almost wish it was just called, you know, the strategy as opposed to the UX strategy, because that sort of puts the onus on us to do it alone, which I already said doesn't work. You've got to have everyone's buy-in and everyone's, you know, input, and so that everyone feels an ownership in it. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add to that? This is a discussion group, so if anyone else wants to share any experiences they've had with this, feel free. Anybody?
Ralph, maybe you've got a follow-up comment.
Oh, I've always got a follow-up comment, but then that may not be conducive to Jillian getting through her presentation.
I know how to shut you down, Ralph. Go ahead.
Good. Well, so Jay just, you know, poked in, how often are you meeting with stakeholders? I guess, you know, whenever the term strategy comes up, my experience has been that, you know, product often will kind of get their hackles raised. And they're like, whoa, strategy, that's what we do. And I think that's kind of one of the things that, you know, Jillian's talking about, when you get buy-in and you get understanding, to basically just realize, hey, we're not trying to like take over all your peanut butter and stick our chocolate in there.
Great analogy, Ralph.
There's different things. Thank you for those of us that are old enough to know those ads. But yeah, I mean, there's UX strategy, there's business strategy, there's products, there's technology strategy. And I just think that's kind of one of the communication issues that we deal with.
No, I think you've got a point there. And, you know, we know that we're doing UX strategy, but we don't necessarily have to call it that. Now, I don't know what we should call it instead. I've certainly never said, you know, I want to do this thing called UX strategy with you. What I've said is I want to help you create a 5-year vision of where you're going. I don't tell them that that falls under the umbrella of UX strategy. I've said, you know, after doing this 5-year vision with you and knowing what goals are important to you, I have found some, you know, I've done some research, and now I have some things that I can tell you that will move the needle for you on all of these things that you've set are your goals. And I think that we should focus on these, and that will get you to the goal that, you know, the big goal, and to the little goals that you've set quarterly and annually and so on and so forth. So, you know, I've never said, you know, let's do UX strategy. It's just sort of that's like, you know, back when I moved from being a graphic designer to being a UX designer, and someone said to me, it just sounded like gobbledygook. They called it UX design, and I was like, well, is that just being a good designer, being user-centered and user-focused and everything? I just call that being a good designer. You know, you don't have to call it anything specific, as long as you're doing it. And if calling it UX strategy is going to alienate the people that you need to work with, don't call it that. you know, you don't
That's
have
a
to
great point.
talk.
Talking in the language of the people with whom you're working. That's
Yeah.
a super good point. If you
Yeah.
throw jargon out there and they're like, what? Or
Exactly.
they're just like resistant to it, don't do that.
There you go.
Jillian, I've got 2 follow-up questions.
Go ahead.
First is from Hassam, who says, when should I practice UX strategy? In parentheses, years of experience.
Hassam, can you come off mute and tell me what you're talking about? Hassam, are you there? Are we pronouncing your name correctly?
You know,
Hassam?
yeah. So in the text, yes, we're pronouncing the name correctly.
Okay.
But
I guess
maybe,
it can't come off mute.
okay.
My philosophy is that you can be a researcher without being a strategist, but it's very hard to be a strategist without having research support if you're not in fact also a researcher, because it requires that input to know, have a real deep understanding of what the users need, and to also have built up that rapport and reputation and authenticity with your stakeholders, your business stakeholders. So I would say practice it all the time, but know that research is an integral part of it. I wrote an article, which I'll share with you guys in Slack. It's called, it's called basically catching, I'm paraphrasing because I wrote it a long time ago, catching UX champions with research bait. And that's basically it. You know, when they get excited about the research, that is when you can really start to build that relationship with them and get them to trust you and get them to work with you. And so that's why I think it's a critical component. Now, if you don't have a researcher, or you're a researcher designer, and I've been in that role before, you know, it can still be done, but the most success I've had is when I was able to capture their attention as a researcher, and we will talk more about that in October. Does that fully answer your question, or did you want to add more to it?
I'm going to give you another question, and we may hear back from Hassam.
Okay.
Oh, Hassam replies, thanks a lot. Yes,
Okay.
that answers the question. Okay, here's the final question. Do you have any communication strategies for ensuring UX strategy across teams?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Nielsen Norman actually had a quiz on finding out what your communication style is. And again, I'll put that in the Slack, but it basically talks about what is your communication style? How can you identify these stakeholders that you're trying to work with in product and engineering? What are their communication styles? And it tells you, if you're this certain type of communicator and they're this other type of communicator, how can you communicate effectively with them? It's a great tool, and it's helped me a lot. One of the things that I found out that as a researcher, my areas of communication are consideration and systematic. And most product owners are direct. And when we start talking in systematic and considerate ways and everything, they just feel like we're talking to talk. What they want to hear from us is, this is what I need from you, or this is how I need you to explain it to me. They want very direct questions, and that's something that's sometimes hard for us to do. But this is really helpful in sort of growing that ability by understanding how they need to hear what you have to say is incredibly helpful, incredibly powerful to get to that point where they just don't think you're an idiot because you're speaking in a different way because of what your role is and how you're built, basically. So that's incredibly helpful. There are also other books and websites and everything that I can send to you that are talking about persuasion and the different methods of persuasion and when they're effective and when they're not. I don't have them in front of me at the moment, or I would speak more clearly to them. But there definitely are some that I learned with Nielsen Norman that you can watch that sort of would help you to figure out a strategy of how to speak to an individual and how you can sort of win them over to your side. And it's, you know, it's some very basic understanding of the sort of the communication dynamics when two people are talking to each other. It works in real life. It works at work. It works as a UXer. You just have to sort of remember it and sort of ingrain it into your life when you're talking to people. So it's very
Jillian,
helpful.
one thing that you taught me that I've used a lot over the past 6 months is bite-sized nuggets of information. So product managers, product owners, their bosses and their bosses, they just want to know, what'd you find out? What can I do about it? What can I do with what you told me? Right.
There
And
you go.
so you turn them
Actionable
into
information.
Dovetail. I've
Mhm.
used the heck out of Dovetail for the past 6 months.
Awesome.
And then I jumped in and used all the communication channels that were available where I landed after we worked together to just give people, hey, you know what, we're doing the study for you. Here's what we found out. You know, we
Yeah.
talked to some people. Here's what it is. We got this info. Stay tuned. There's more coming on.
Mhm.
And just to try to get people and keep them engaged, right? That's
Yes.
the thing that's keep them engaged every few days. I mean, in corporate, you know, it's very quick. And so, yeah, we'll come up with a more nuanced explanation of what we uncovered. But that kind of like, you know, I don't know what to call it, bang, bang kind of, you know, we did some stuff,
Yeah.
we heard some stuff, here's what we think.
Yeah.
Just keeps people engaged and makes it
Well,
a
it's
great way to
basically-
communicate in their kind of cadence.
Yeah, it's transparency, and it's also this continuing idea of notes from the field. You're constantly giving them information, and again, you know, they eat that stuff up because it reinforces some of the ideas that they already have. But then you're also tacking new information on top of it, which makes you look smart. It makes you look like you know what you're talking about because they already believe half of what you're saying because they already know it to be true based on their experience with the company and with the users. And then you're giving them additional information. They're like, oh, well, if this other thing is true, then this is true too. So again, that makes you an authority. So yeah, I try, because of my experience as a designer, I try to keep the idea of actionable information. I don't want to just give them academic information. Oh, isn't it wonderful that 50% of the people said this and 25% of the people said that? No, it's like, you know, we have this big problem here and, you know, we need to fix it. And here are our options for fixing it. And we think, you know, based on the way we know the users, because I've been working with them for over 3 years, I think this is the best solution. And then we talk about it. So that's how that works. So yeah, over transparency with these people is very helpful. You need to be, it's a way of being loud and being seen, and doing it with authority. So that's a good thing to do. So Raymond, do you have another question?
Ralph alluded to the other question that's up, but I'll just mention it again from Jay Mersch. How often are you meeting with stakeholders?
Thanks for queuing that up. Jay is my design partner at XPO. So I've already talked to him a couple of times today.
Nice setup, Jay.
We actually do meet with the stakeholders on a regular cadence. Some of them want to meet every 2 weeks, and that's fine. Some of them want to meet once a month, and that's fine. But again, in building up a rapport with them, I've asked them, do you want to be included on all my presentations, my research presentations? The answer has been an overwhelming yes. And then I'm like, do you want to be invited to observe all my research presentations? The answer has been an overwhelming yes. They don't attend all of them, but even just getting that invite in the email, they know it's going on. They know who I'm talking to, and they know what I'm talking to them about. And it piques their interest, and it keeps them engaged with me. It keeps my name in front of them. These people who did not know UX existed before I started talking to them. So this is how you start to build up your authority and you know, the awareness and the excitement about what UX can bring, is to constantly talk to these people and present to them. And I drag Jay to all of my meetings with these guys. And sometimes he presents some designs. Sometimes I talk to them about research and let them know what I'm finding out, so they get like inside scoop. They like that. Sometimes, you know, they tell me about things that are coming up that are not on my awareness, and that's great because I need to know about them so that I can sort of incorporate them. And so this, to tell you how it went, the first time I had one of these one-on-one sessions with my very first UX champion, you know, I'd asked for the meeting, he had agreed to it, we met, and both of us said at the same time, how can I help you? That's awesome. I've got great stakeholders. It doesn't always go that way, but I feel very blessed that they are very excited to talk to me, and, you know, they see the value in what I'm doing, and that they want me to, they want to help me. And I, of course, want to help them. So it makes it a great working relationship when you can have that. And you can get to that point. I'm convinced you can get to that point with just about anybody, as long as you are, you know, showing your value to them constantly with this transparency and engaging with them. And the funny thing is, when I asked the third stakeholder if he wanted to set up a one-on-one meeting, his response was, I thought you'd never ask. So, you know, that's where you really want to be. You know, I sort of did it in stages. I built up my confidence with each one and engaged with each one. And the very last one, you know, that was the response. So that was very exciting.
Hey, Jillian, this is for Jillian and Raymond, this is for a future presentation. So not everyone is as forthright and outgoing as Jillian and or myself, especially amongst UX researchers. And so it would be really interesting to have a discussion and maybe some tips and tricks about, hey, look, you may be more introverted, and that's why you got into
Ralph, I
research.
am an introvert. I'm faking
Yeah, I know,
right
but
now.
you do a great job of projecting. And so a lot of people struggle with that. And I just thought that would be,
you know,
really
I think that would be a great conversation for the Slack channel, where everyone can input their ideas on it, and it could be a long conversation. I do test as an introvert, and so yes, this is the only place where I'm outgoing, but I have to psych myself up to do this, and then I have to take a nap afterwards. So
I get it.
You know what I'll be doing for the rest of the
So
day.
many of us are the same way, and it's because a lot of what we're talking about is engaging with stakeholders, getting out in front of people, establishing relationships, taking the first step. And that can be so difficult for a lot of people in our line of work. I just think it'd be a fascinating
Absolutely.
Slack or whatever presentation.
I will say, however, that a lot of introverted people are good one-on-one, and that's where those one-on-one conversations might be helpful. And, you know, also asynchronous communication, emails, Slack, you know, anything that you can do that is does not require you to sort of be on guard. Zoom meetings are the worst for that. But yeah, so those things can help. LinkedIn saved my career because I could network in an asynchronous way and be
amen to that.
with people. Yeah. So I do want to make sure we get to the rest of the deck, but I want to give Raymond a chance to see if there are any last questions we need to take. If not, we can move on and talk about who can do UX strategy.
That's all the questions for now.
Okay. I think Raymond wants to move on and see what I have to say next. Okay, who can do UX strategy? Anybody can do it. UX strategy is a leadership function, but leadership is not rank. Management is rank. And that is not to say that people who are in management can't be leaders. Obviously, they can be both. But management is something that is conferred to you by your employer. It is not something that that you can do on your own. Leadership is something you can do on your own. You don't need somebody's permission to be a leader. You just need to work in a leadership way. I do not have any direct reports. I do, however, have a couple of more junior researchers that work with me who look up to me simply because of my seniority and the fact that I sort of exude this authority. And you know, I've built up the UX reputation in research with the stakeholders and everything. So that sort of gives me a leadership role. And there's a great video, if I find it, I'll put it on the Slack channel, of that sort of is the quintessential idea of how you become a leader. And basically, to be a leader, you need one follower, and the one follower is the person who makes you a leader. So, but it was a great video, basically, of someone dancing out in a park by himself, and until someone else came and joined him and started dancing, you know, in the park with him, he wasn't a leader. Now that he's got a follower that is willing to go out there and dance like an idiot in the park, now he's a leader. So anyway, the difference between leadership and management. Leadership is transformative. I'm not going to read all these to you, but the highlights here is that leadership provides vision. It focuses on the future. It seeks change. It motivates others. These are all things that I've been talking to you about with dealing with stakeholders and trying to get them to work with us in this way. Management is very transactional. It's I had a UX manager that I worked with at Wells Fargo who said basically management was administrivia, which is merging together of administrative work and trivia. So that's how she saw it. But, you know, they drive the quality execution. They oversee the current processes. They analyze and execute team performance. You know, they're managing others. And so they're basically, you know, steering the ship and making sure everybody stays on track. Whereas leadership is very transformative, and we're basically building new tracks and giving us other options and so forth. That's the way I see it. But the main takeaway that I want you to have here is that you can be a leader, even if your company has not conferred upon you a management role. You do not need direct reports. Steve Covey says that management is efficiency in climbing the ladder of success. Leadership determines whether the ladder is leaning against the right wall. I think that's a great quote. And we are at questions again. These are the two topics that I wanted to talk to you about. We've got about 20 minutes left. So who has questions about leadership and about your ability to be a UX strategist? Raymond, do we have anybody?
I'm just looking for any questions to come into the chat.
Otherwise, I can talk to Ralph for 20 more minutes. I know he's got at least 20 minutes of material.
No. I mean, I think it is awesome if people want to come off mute and just ask you any questions directly.
Yeah, here's the last slide, people. On October 11th, we will talk about how to identify and create UX champions. On December 8th, we will talk about how to, you know, initiate UX research-led projects that get prioritized and funded. That's the end of the deck, but I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
No, we do have a question from Hudson again.
Okay.
What do I have to do to develop my leadership skills?
There is another quiz that you can take and again, I'll put that in the Slack, that you can identify what your leadership skills are. I believe there was a set of 6 or 8. And basically you want to grow all of those skills, but it will tell you which ones you already have, and it will tell you which ones that you need to work on. And it will also tell you which scenarios you need, which ones you should use in which scenario. And there is one that sounds kind of negative. They call it coercive, which I found very interesting. But it's basically, the scenario is that you know, it's a very low level employee. You just need to give them instructions on how to get something done. It's also called direct, which is a much more polite way to put it. But, you know, the example I'm giving here is that even though it sounds rude or, you know, bad, it's really, you know, I've got a temp coming in, I need them to input this information. Let me give them instructions on how to do it. That's direct. That's a leadership style. Now, if I took that leadership style and talked to a very senior designer or researcher and said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you some very basic steps and tell you how to do your job, and then you're going to do it. That's not going to work, at least not for long, and not with me. I got to tell you, introverted as I may be, I'm not going to stay in that kind of scenario very long. So there are different styles for different situations, and where, you know, this direct method is one method. It works in one case. It's the one you would probably want to use the least, but there are other styles. And again, we can talk about that in a future session, and I can definitely give you the quiz link on Slack, and we can talk about it. I wound up being strong in 4 of them and not strong in 2 of them. There are some, you know, there are pros and cons for each of them, and places where it's not helpful and places where it makes perfect sense to use them. So basically what you want to do is study these different styles of leadership and know when to pull them out. It's kind of like the communication that we talked about earlier, is you can learn these styles and you can work on them and just know how to read the room and know when you should use them. They're all helpful. They all have their place, and it's just a practice. And again, it's one of those things that sticks in the back of my head. Am I using the right communication method? Am I using the right leadership style in order to accomplish what I want to accomplish? So again, yes, I will share that.
Jillian, Josephine has a question for you.
Okay, Josephine, go ahead. Hi.
I'm really loving your presentation so
Thank
much.
you.
A while back, I took a workshop in something that was called, you might have heard of this, I don't know, precision questioning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting because when I use it, you know, of course you have to select the right context to use it. And as the title of the skill implies, you know, it's a way of having a conversation, but you know, you ask a series of questions. It's not like an interrogation or something that an attorney would ask, but there's a certain amount of deliberateness in the way the questions are formed, and sometimes they're formed in a series to attempt to get clarity about something. But what I sometimes find is that sometimes people seem to not respond really well to this type of an approach. And, you know, sometimes if sometimes people are kind of muddy communicators, and I will sometimes ask a series of questions in an effort to pull out a precise piece of information. And they'll just kind of sort of wiggle out of the exchange, and you know, and sometimes I'll even ask a question that winds up being so simple that it's yes or no or I don't know as an answer, and yet the person who's responding is like, well, you know, they just sort of evade the question.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Now, is this in a research session? Josephine, are you a researcher?
I am a researcher.
Okay, and this is in a research session, you're having these issues?
Well, I'm not thinking of it in a research context, but
okay.
you know, just in you know, everyday communications with maybe technical recruiters or in a more general setting.
Okay. Yeah. Well, when it comes to technical recruiters, my guess would be they either A, don't know the answer, or B, aren't allowed to give you the answer. That would be my answer for that and everything. But when it comes to research and everything, everybody has they're doing what they think is going to benefit them the best. They're getting something out of not answering that question. And that is really the what you need to find out. And, you know, I think you're doing the best you can coming at it from a bunch of different ways. But if they don't want to answer the question, I find that depending on the personality type I'm dealing with, it could be a case of where they don't want to look stupid. So, you know, they don't feel comfortable answering the question because they feel like it's going to make them look bad. And I'm not saying that you're doing anything wrong that way. I'm saying it's their own personal makeup that makes them act that way. One of the things that I think has made me a very effective researcher, and of course I apply that, you can't take the researcher out, you know, out in the public and still not be a researcher. You know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Yeah. So it's ingrained in me. I grew up in the South, and it's ingrained in me to think of these conversations that I've invited them to as sort of, I'm the hostess. It's my job to make them comfortable and to make sure they feel like they can answer anything and there's no consequences. So I put on my, you know, Southern charm hospitality hat. You'll have to find your own way to make that work for you, but make them feel comfortable. And you know how to do this in research, but it works in real life too. And it works in the office and everything. You start the conversation not with, I need to find this information out. You start the conversation with these people that need to feel like they're not stupid, you know. And I've done research with a lot of people where they're very, especially at banks, they're very knowledgeable in their field, but they're not knowledgeable about banking. So that's an area where there's a sense of uncomfortableness that they feel like they're going to sound stupid if they say anything. And, you know, I'm always just, you know, this is just a conversation between us, you know, and this is something you have to deal with different cultures as well. But things like, you know, if you can say, you know, if, you know, you're speaking for not just yourself, but anyone else, you know, I can only talk to so many people about this. I really want you to, you know, speak. Would somebody else have a problem with this? Or would somebody else do that? You have to do that a lot with some cultures where there's this sort of saving face idea, especially in the Eastern cultures. They're very hesitant to criticize. And basically what is research is getting them to criticize and say something's wrong that they want fixed. So, and take that again, I worked for a Japanese-owned company before I got into UX, and they actually went forward with one of my designs. We put it on all of our software packaging and everything, and it turns out that it made the Eastern countries uncomfortable with some of the design imagery that I had used. So instead of telling me that, you know, I was dealing with the president of the company. Instead of telling me that, he went through and did all of this, and then we wound up having to redo all of it again. And that was an international project, you know, and if he had just been able to tell me. So you've got to create that space where they feel comfortable telling you anything. It's almost like you're their psychiatrist. You know, that it's a perfectly safe space. Every answer, you know, I always start my research sessions. I haven't said it lately, but I probably should. Every answer you give me today is going to be correct, because all I'm looking for is your opinion. So, you know, and if they give me something that's particularly juicy and I go, that was the correct answer, you know, just to reinforce that, keep it light, make them feel comfortable. You're the hostess. You're trying to make them feel like it's a safe space that they can tell you anything. When I was at Wells Fargo, one lady I was in a research session with, we had this list of all these different categories that would apply to this sort of credit card statement. It was like basically employee credit cards and categories that they could be allowed to charge to. And I asked her to look at it and you know, basically circle the ones that she thought made sense and put X through the ones that she thought didn't make sense, whatever, just sort of get her spin on it and everything. And, you know, I had been talking to this woman for almost an hour, and this was like the last thing she had to do. And she looked at me and she said, I can say anything. And I said, yeah, you can say anything. She crossed this one off and she wrote beside it, what the hell? And I was like, okay, that's awesome. I'm glad you said that. You know, reinforce anything that they're going out on a limb to tell you, and tell them that it's perfectly safe, that was a perfectly awesome thing to say. And just, you know, again, you know, that Southern hospitality works every time. You'll have to find your own way to make it your own. But I think that probably can get you far. I hope that helps. Those are just some examples. That I realize most of them were research related, but yeah, you can do that with anybody.
Very interesting. I appreciate it.
Okay. Any other questions?
Jillian, you've got another question from Hing, who asks,
Okay.
any tips for formulating UX research strategy when working on a project individually?
Hang, can you come off mute and tell me what the project setup is? Is this a personal project that you're working on?
Yeah, sorry if it's a little loud.
No, you're fine.
I guess, okay. I guess, yeah, so I'm working on a personal project, and I'm actually hired on as the designer. However, I kind of wanted to get some more research done. I still haven't really met with the project manager to formally go over everything in terms of like what they're looking for. However, if I already kind of know that going into it, is there like I guess a way to frame that so that it would enable me to kind of have some more of their buy-in, along with how do you like not succumb to the pitfalls of like going down your own rabbit holes and what you think that like research should be led by when you're working individually, where like when you're in a team, it usually balances out and you have other people to put you in check.
So there are two things that are coming to mind. One is that when, especially since you're not used to, you're used to focusing on design instead of research, one of the critical things you can do at the beginning of research is talk to all of your stakeholders, product, you know, business, whoever, and find out what their objectives are to finding out about the users. That should be your key lead in to all of the questions that you ask. Now, just because they have a test objectives doesn't mean that you can't also have testing objectives. And that is a leadership thing. That's where you own the fact that you're doing research and you have your own questions that you need to get answered to make sure that your design is successful. The other thing you can do, and this is a little sneaky because if you don't have an in with the business stakeholders and everything, is you can go on their website and look at their mission statement and make sure that you're incorporating those values into what their strategy is. That is something where they give you a lot of information. It's freely available. Anybody can read it. You can look at their anything on how they communicate to their stakeholders, and sort of you can see what their goals are, even if they don't tell you. Now, they might not be thinking about it in terms of for this particular design project, but it sort of gives you, you're doing basically user persona work of the business leadership and trying to get into their heads and understand what's important to them. And then you can incorporate that into the research, and especially into the research presentation that you make to them and the design. You can tie that back in, and it just makes you look smarter that you have taken this time and this effort and that you really get them and understand what's important to them. And then again, you take that, you take what you hear from the users and you merge them together and you come up with a solution that meets both of their needs. That's UX strategy. Whether they give you permission to do UX strategy, whether you ever use that phrase, that's what it is. And, you know, again, that's just being a good researcher, a good designer, and in little words that in 8-point type that nobody ever gets to read UX strategy if that's going to make them nervous. You don't have to say it big. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's really helpful.
Okay. We still have 5 minutes. Does anybody else have a question? I'm going to let Ralph start talking again if nobody has a question.
Oh, you don't need to fill the time, Jillian. It's been an awesome session.
Don't tempt me. I'll jump right in here.
I think you can, make your summary, your closing statement, whatever that is. It's been terrific.
Yeah, okay. Well, I hope that you see that this is something that you can do, and that you see that it's just a slight shift in the way you think about things. It's a slight mental shift to thinking about what does the business need from me in order for me to service the user's needs. We always want to make the user's lives better with the work that we produce, but we stand a much better chance of doing that if we're also, speaking to the business in the way that they need to hear it, and just using their language. It's not manipulative. They really appreciate it. They want you to do that so that they can be successful. Everybody wants to be successful. And when you make the business successful, you make the user successful, you make everybody successful, you become successful. There's enough success to go around for everybody. But it takes that turning the UX lens towards the company and towards the people that you're working with, and understanding those people that you're working with in a way that helps you facilitate the work that you're doing. That's really what it is. So I definitely look forward to talking to you all more in the Slack channel, and continuing this conversation, and hopefully you'll get a lot of more meaty details on how to actually do these things. How to grow your network in the company, creating UX champions, and then the beauty of being able to create your own projects and getting them funded and everything. Once you've established that authority, that's the icing on the cake at the very end, to be able to have that authority and that approval and everything. So I'm really excited about that. When I sort of was doing it out of necessity because I had so much other work to do, I needed to combine some things. But then it turned out to be so successful that I'm now doing it intentionally. And that's what this really is with a little bit of mind shift, you can do these things intentionally, whereas you may have been doing them unintentionally and not aware that what sort of impact you're having. So intentionality is the key there. But I thank you all for coming. I hope that you'll come in October and again in December. The reason we're not meeting in November is because it would have fallen on election day, and nobody needs that kind of stress. So I hope you'll all go out and vote in November, and then I'll meet you again in December. So anyway, thank you.
Jillian, thank you. Awesome.
Thanks, Jillian. That's great.
Thanks, Ralph. Thanks, Josephine.
Thanks to everyone who came. What a great group. What good questions you had. That really makes it more interesting to have that participation.
Absolutely. So bring good questions the next